Let's get into the first big story. Breaking news. Breaking news from earlier today. Armed man who wanted to kill Brett Kavanaugh arrested near Justice's home. California man was in possession of a gun and burglary tools. The man, 26-year-old Nicholas John Rosk of Simi Valley, California, was carrying a firearm, according to Fox News. He also had burglary tools. The federal affidavit filed against the would-be assailant states Rosk was in possession of pepper spray, zip ties, a hammer, a crowbar, duct tape, and a tactical knife, in addition to a Glock 17 pistol with 2 magazines and ammunition. Sources for the Post claimed the man was angered over a leaked draft of a February Supreme Court opinion that could possibly signal the overturning of Roe v. Wade. They indicated he was also upset about the recent spate of mass shootings. This is clearly modern Democrat liberal politics motivating this guy to try and kill a Supreme Court justice. Now I want to show you this. This is the Southern Poverty Law Center's poll that came out 1 week ago. Section 4, partisanship and violence. Total approval for, quote, assassinating a politician who is harming the country or our democracy. Shockingly, younger Republican men, 1/3 of them agree with that. Younger Democratic men, 44%, the largest group, support political assassinations. Now, I know it's bad because we have this young Democrat-minded individual who is apparently he's charged with attempted murder.
Right.
That's it. Charged with attempted murder. Young Republican women were at 40% in support of assassinations, and young Republican men at 34%. Young Democratic women.
That's what I talked about earlier. You know, that's the other side of the aisle. That's the concern, honestly. You know, I mean, you talk about violence in the streets. It's
probably why the reason I would say young Republican men are probably the younger demographic, the least likely to support. They're not. Young Democrat women were the least likely. But I would say one of the reasons younger Republican men are lower in support of this is because many of them may have actually seen violence. Many of them are veterans.
Absolutely. But that's the thing. I mean, it's the younger group of people. You know, it's not the older group. So it's the next generation coming up that they're so frustrated with our political system right now that this is what they believe the alternative is. And it is. If people aren't being heard, that is the alternative. For sure. It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on. That's what you see it all the time. Well, those are where revolutions come from.
Another aspect to understand here is that the younger generation is more emotionally unstable, is more likely to be in poverty, has less ability for upward economic mobility, and is being dumped with big pharma medicines on top of having not harmonious relationships with partners. So when you add all of that up, you have the perfect recipe for radicalization, because if you look at what's been happening in the Middle East, you see a lot of guys who are not intelligent. IQ is also going down here in the United States. That's also a correlation with violence. So is poverty. So is relationship status. You see all of those factors going down. So politically, we are prepping the next generation of the youth to be violent people, especially when you look at the mind control that's happening on big tech social media that is pushing them to these radical ideas by censoring free speech, by censoring debate, and only allowing echo chambers to be heard, radicalizing individuals towards their political opinions even further, which is extremely dangerous. And to me, this is all being done deliberately, a part of a divide and conquer agenda. So people fight each other rather than look at the true culprits of the problems that are being created for them.
Yep. I would agree with that. I talk about it a lot, actually. One of my favorite days in my lifetime is actually September 12th, 2001. The day after 9/11, when, you know, we're still reeling in pain. Everybody's in shock because of what happened. But in that time, you know, the images that were coming out, people were covered in ashes from the towers and everything. It didn't matter what color you were. It didn't matter who you voted for in the last election cycle. It didn't matter what your gender was or what religion. You were an American and we had your back. And that's what we have to get back to. If we don't get back to that, then what are we going to do as a nation?
I was there in New York City. The dust went into my neighborhood. And I also, I think we should be careful. After that, we also went into, Iraq. We went to Afghanistan. We got ourselves into a mess. There was a lot of cohesion. There was a lot of patriotism. But the political parties inside of the United States used it for their own personal advantage, helping the military-industrial complex, leading us astray with our foreign policy, creating a lot of devastating situations that I think, we're looking back on, were absolute mistakes that we relied into.
If we could, I was there too, actually. I lived in there, and I remember hanging out with everybody on the 12th and sitting out at lunch just talking and feeling it, like making eye contact with people walking down the street. Right. I want that without the tragedy. Without the devastation. We don't need to scare people into that.
But there was a cohesion. There was an energy. We're in this together. my friends, my family were a part of this, and you looked at your neighbor, you saw someone that was, a part of your country, because, the whole idea was we were attacked, we need to come together. So there was a lot of strength in that moment, and there was a lot of, amazing things that could have happened. But I just think, we always got to be also careful in those moments as well.
Like the Federal Reserve System, it's a form of attack. Inflation is a kind of theft, like you said earlier, Luke, and it's not a joke.
Yeah, it's the largest tax.
If people felt that attack like September 11th, I think there would be a lot more of unity around it as a form of national defense.
Well, they're going to start feeling it.
People can only understand, the average person only understands single layer issues. So they say, why don't I make enough money at my job? Or they say, more importantly, why can't I afford to buy gas? And what do you get from the average, millennial, or particularly millennial females who vote Democrat? It's because I'm not being paid enough by my boss.
Right.
That's not the case. That's not the case. And so they say, we need to raise the minimum wage. And you say, okay, that's layer one. What's layer two to that proposal? Increasing the minimum wage results in just generic inflation across the board, and it creates only a temporary relief that doesn't actually solve the problem.
Yeah,
but
you get about
this
6
is
months.
If that.
Yep.
And so, you try to explain basic economics to people. The minimum wage is completely meaningless.
Yep.
Completely. What matters is how much can you buy for the equivalent of 1 hour of labor.
Yep.
So they say, well, then we should pay more. But that number doesn't mean anything, because when you just make everybody have to be paid a base rate, then the base cost of good has to go up.
Has to.
They like to point out like Denmark, and they're like, well, in Denmark, they pay $20 an hour and a burger's only $2. Totally different economy, value systems, and a different valuing of labor per hour than we have. You can't solve cultural problems with policy.
Yeah.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And that's one of the things that, being a small business owner, one of the things I talked to with all my, staff about, I was talking to one of my buddies, and when the minimum wage went up, he thought it was a great idea. I'm like, well, sure, it's a great idea, except for now you're just simply reducing your purchasing power. It's going to happen in time. You're going to have a cycle. It's going to come back around. And then very, very soon, he was like, wait a minute, all of our supplies are way more expensive now. And it took about 6 months. I said, yep. And it's going to take you about 3 or 4 years for us to catch up to be charging again what we had, again, 2 years ago.
It's also
just one thing really quickly. The financial components are important here, but just back to this Kavanaugh story, because this is a big story. This is something major that has been building up incrementally to the point where even the Department of Homeland Security just issued a new memo saying that there's most likely a very big chance for more violence this summer politically because of the midterms, because of the border crisis, because of the Supreme Court decisions. So even Homeland Security is warning, saying there's going to be some internal violence and turmoil happening here in the United States. How do we de-escalate it when almost every single factor, big tech, social media, the corporate mainstream media, every politician is adding fuel to the fire? How do we stop it?
You can't.
Yep.
I don't think it's possible. Maybe it was possible 6 years ago. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe with Donald Trump, he really broke these people. But I believe that, I've been covering. I was covering conflict and crisis at Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah.
I started covering it for Vice. I covered a little bit when I was working for Fusion, the ABC News company. And I don't see a path towards bringing this country together. What I see is you have what I like to reference Stephen Marsh. He wrote the book, The Next Civil War, what he said to us, that you have a multicultural democracy and a constitutional republic in the same country trying to fight for control, and you can't have both. And he's completely right. I believe in a constitutional republic. Mm-hmm. I grew up traditionally Democrat, but the reason why today people who used to be on the left, like Elon Musk or Joe Rogan, are called right-wing, is because they still believe in those values of a constitutional republic. The left, absolute chaos. Right now, you have Occupy Wall Street activists that I know tweeting in defense of telling children it's not going to lick itself.
Wow.
They have no principles. They have no moral standard other than I want power, F you. Yeah. One side has no principles, one side has standardized principles and various disagreements. You've got post-liberals, libertarians, moderates, centrists, and conservatives in one side, and then you have the psychotic death cult on the other side.
Right.
There was confrontations. There was fighting outside of that Dallas venue where they were doing those sick things with children. There was activists coming there saying, no, we're going to fight anyone who's protesting this. This is the insane level that we reach that we need to understand.
I want to explain what I just said, psychotic death cult. Because I hear it all the time from the left and MSNBC. They're like the Trump supporters in a cult. Let me explain. The QAnon people, I think they're nuts. I completely disagree with conservative Christians on a lot of moral issues. But we can sit down and talk about the Constitution, the founding documents, the rules by which we seek to compromise and self-govern. I can sit here and say, I disagree with you, conservative, on tax policy. And then we all laugh, get along, and tell each other jokes. The other side puts a big neon sign up saying it's not going to lick itself. They firebomb buildings. We had the worst riots we've ever seen, and it's all lies. And I'm not just talking about leftists. I'm talking about the mainstream press, the corporate press. MSNBC had the nerve to come out and be like, what a shocking story. This man had weapons and he was at Kavanaugh's home. MSNBC.
You advocated for it.
They advocated. MSNBC ran a story saying it was good that they were going to his house.
Right.
These people are absolutely deranged. Look, when Trump comes out and says something, I outright say, I think he's wrong. He talks about fraud all the time. I'm like, nah, that guy's wrong. And they call us a cult. No, I'm telling you that guy's wrong. But they come out on their own platform and say, it's good we're going to his house. Then it happens. They go, oh, heavens me. They're in a cult. They prop up whatever is not the right or whatever is not America.
Yep.
And that extends to the point where they've lost their minds. And you have adult men taking dollar bills from children into bikinis and thongs. You have this thing in Dallas where it says it's not going to lick itself. And they're like, this is a good and normal thing and it's family friendly. And I'm like, no, you just have no principles, no standards, no morals. And all you do is fight for power for whatever your side is. And your side is basically whatever the other is not.
No, you're absolutely right. They actually treat it like a faith system. That's what's interesting to me. I mean, so amidst everything else, I'm also an ordained minister. So they treat it very much like a faith system. They promote it like one, defend it like one. And the interesting thing is that, I mean, even saying liberals anymore, I don't think it's accurate.
Right.
I really don't. I mean, I have friends that were liberals 5 years ago, but I wouldn't call them a liberal now. The liberal is gone. They've been taken over by radicals. This is radical liberalism.
Well, so the interesting thing that happened is that the principled liberals have become what's called disaffected or post-liberal.
Yep.
And the people who are just tribalists have become establishment or leftist.
Right.
But it's funny because you look at a lot of these younger leftists, they're pro-guns. Mm-hmm. But they keep defending the establishment and the psychopathy of this cult.
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's why I'm sorry. Look, I just got to put it this way. When they come out and they have children on stage at 21 and up gay bars, Desmond is amazing, ripping off his clothing and being handed money to do so. That's called stripping.
Yeah.
And I'm not exaggerating. Anybody who knows anything about what stripping is knows that bikini bars are fully clothed.
Right.
Women dancing on poles and shaking it for men for cash, but they're wearing clothes. When you have a little boy on stage and he rips his clothes off for adult gay men who give him money,
it's pedophilia.
These are pedophiles.
Yeah.
And the left overtly defends it. And what do you get in Florida? When a reasonable proposal is made, maybe parents should know about this. They say, you're trying to ban gay people. It's like, dude, if you want to defend pedophiles, that's on you. But this is why I don't think there's reconciliation.
Yeah, and maybe not, especially for some of these issues. And I talk a lot about, especially with the campaign, how you think about things on a different level. Quite honestly, I think everybody should run for office because it makes you think about things in a different level than you ever would have before. It's really interesting. But I talk a lot about just getting back to our founding principles of faith, family, and freedom, like these very basic things that, some people call them trite. I think if we don't get back to the things that made us great to start with, I think we're doomed as a nation. And so some of that I think is absolutely right. I think it ties into what you're talking about right now. Well,
the crazy thing to me is like, policy-wise, I've always been rather liberal.
Sure.
But this day and age,
not anymore.
Well, I'm sorry. Like, we had a guy on the show who's progressive who said, I asked him, do you think women should be able to get an abortion at 9 months? And he said, it's the woman's choice. And I'm like, why kill the baby? You can end the pregnancy by delivering the baby and let the baby live and just drop it at a fire department. And he's like, woman's choice. I'm like, okay, there's nothing there.
But then you have California that now are trying to advocate post-term abortion. And you've heard it. They on the street. I've heard people say in interviews. They said, "Well, it's 7 days after birth. If a woman decides to give up on the life of her child, should she be charged?" Like, you mean murder a child?
In Virginia. So do you remember this in Virginia? I think it was Kathy Tran was her name. She proposed a bill, a no restriction abortion.
Yep.
And she was asked, I think it was by a judge. He said, if a woman is dilating at the point of birth, could you abort the baby? And she said there would be no restrictions.
It's disgusting.
That's in Virginia.
It's evil.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to watch live, you can check out this channel Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to this channel, and if you want more unfiltered and uncensored content with all of these guests, go to timcast.com and become a member. All of these guests you know and love in exclusive segments on our website where we are unrestricted in what we talk about, so you'll definitely not want to miss it. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you all next time.